back. Welcome to the Offload Delay Podcast, a podcast for first responders and for all those who are curious about what we do and see day in, day out in our line of work. Today, really special guest and a friend, colleague, worked alongside this gentleman for a long time. We're going to call him Brad as well. It's pretty easy to remember that one. Been a police officer in the province of Ontario, specifically southeastern Ontario, for many years, as long as I've been in emergency services anyway. So we'll have Brad introduce himself here shortly and discuss his history. We're all involved in our line of work with calls that could change our lives on any given day, but Brad had a particular call in 2004 where he was called to end someone else's life as part of his line of work. And just the story behind this is remarkable. Shows the true nature of police work, not only in our province, but pretty much everywhere in the world, especially in North America, where the risks are tremendously high and the toll it can pay that's paid by these responders is just as high, if not higher. So let me bring in Brad, introduce you. Here's Brad. Brad, welcome.
Hey,
see you. I'm really glad that you could join and you're willing to share your story today. I know we have a lot of stories. We could go on and on and on, but this one in particular is a story about you doing your job as well as anyone can do that job. I'm just going to reiterate now, you're a sergeant with a police force in Southern Ontario. And you have been for how long, Brad?
Well, I've been a sergeant for three years, and I started in policing in 2000.
Okay, so we're well over 20 years in emergency services, and I know throughout that time you've held several roles. You had a long stint in the traffic services.
Yeah, I started in the traffic world kind of in 2003 when I started being a breath tech, and then took the TCI course, the collision investigation course, in 2006, and then worked in a full-time traffic unit for 11 years from 2010 until February this year, when I switched over to managing a platoon. So 10 years full-time as a traffic guy, and I've been doing it for about 18 of my 20 years.
And over those years, we know there's been hundreds of calls, some minor and some very much not minor.
Yeah.
And we know there's been some tolls taken on yourself, your family, your personal mental well-being that you've had to manage through certain instances. And this pod today will focus on the call in June of 2004.
Yeah, June 18th.
I'm going to let you tell the story, and I'm going to zoom out here. Yeah,
it's a good one to share because it's a bit of a story. So it's June 18th, 2004, and I'm working a shift for a coworker who needed the night off. And it involves a man named Curtis. And we had some dealings, Curtis and I, leading up to that night in the spring of 2004, that led to him being on some conditions. And one of them was not to consume alcohol. And that evening, I was heading up Highway 37 to write some traffic tickets. And I got a call that Curtis was at a bar in downtown Belleville and was in violation of his alcohol conditions by being at that bar. So I made my way down for the purpose of effecting Curtis's arrest for breaching. And when I got there, I learned that he had fled before we got there and had been consuming alcohol. So I formed my grounds that he was good to be arrested for street, and taking a look to see if I could see Curtis. And I did see him. I saw him crossing the street going into another bar. And I parked my car and went after Curtis, and we had a brief foot chase and ended up in an alleyway in our downtown. and I caught up to Curtis, and I reached out and took him by his shoulder and told him he was under arrest. And he kind of chuckled, and he said, "No, not tonight." And as he was doing that, I was behind him, and he reached into his waistband with his right hand, and he pulled out a revolver, and he ran away from me, probably about 20 yards away from me towards the area of a parked car. And at the same time, another officer who was working that afternoon arrived in the alleyway at the same time. And so we were in a bit of a diamond formation in an alleyway that's maybe 30 yards wide, and beside a car, and the other officer is maybe 20 yards to my left. I'm closer to the river. The other officer's closer to Front Street in this alleyway that leads from Front Street down towards the parking lot beside the river. And Curtis is pointing the firearm at the other officer, and he points it at me, and we're yelling the police challenge at him to get him to stop doing what he's doing. And then I got hit in my right knee, and immediately I think I'm shot. And I think that it's time to stop yelling and start shooting because I've been hit. So that's what happens. And 16 shots fired by the police, and Curtis was hit 8 times, and tragically he lost his life that afternoon. What hit me in my knee turned out to be a piece of brick from the wall behind Curtis that was a chunk that had been broken off by one of the other officers' first rounds that he fired, had hit, and a piece had come back and struck me in my knee. So I wasn't hit by gunfire, but it didn't change my mindset that I thought I'd been hit in the leg. And one of the things that we learn as police officers is that our legs are a really bad place to receive a gunshot wound because they have big structures, those big femoral arteries that can end your life in seconds. And they also almost immediately impact your ability to move. And in a tactical situation, you don't want to get hit in the legs. You can take a hit other places and still be able to have your mobility. But if you've been hit in the leg, that's a bad spot. So so it's a sunny early summer evening. As I said, working for a friend, and in seconds it went from a normal arrest for a breach of a bail condition not to consume alcohol to a gunfight, and it over in seconds, and then you start moving through the administrative and the procedural nightmare that is what it's like to take offensive action against a person that results in serious injury or death in Ontario. That's the purview of the Special Investigations Unit, and also then getting legal counsel really for the first time in my life. And the legal counsel that I'm getting is that I'm being investigated for a homicide. Whether it's justified or not, that's the advice that you get, is that there are men and women who are on their way down to investigate this incident, and it doesn't get any more serious than that.
No, I was working in the city in that time, Brad, and I wasn't responding to that call, but we definitely, as other responders, as colleagues, as part of the brother and sisterhood of us all responding, we heard, and the gut feeling that I had immediately was, as anyone would imagine, it was just a sickening feeling to know that one of our trusted protectors of the community had to resort to basically their ultimate training, their ultimate level of force to protect the rest of us from these particular individuals. Can you describe the feeling knowing you're going to pull that trigger? Was it just total training kicking in, or was this a matter of that brief moment where you're like, the emotions I can't imagine? I can't even pretend to say I understand.
They talk about the police officers shoot to stop the threat. I mean, that's the training. We don't shoot to cause pain. We don't shoot to convince a person to stop doing what they're doing. You use the force, whatever that force may be, to stop that threat from existing. And so, in this case, it wasn't my intention to take his life. It wasn't my intention to cause his death. It wasn't. It wasn't. It was that I wanted him to stop pointing that gun at me, and I thought that I'd been shot.
Right.
And the and even when he went down, he still was holding onto the gun, and he was still pointing the gun in our direction. And so it was a very, very difficult situation. And I knew that he had sons. I knew who this person was. This wasn't an unknown quantity to me. And so the decision to pull the trigger was not one that there wasn't a to a B to a C to a D to a. He was pointing a firearm at me, and he was pointing a firearm at my partner who was in the alleyway that night, and I needed him to stop doing that before I took what I perceived to be another round. And there was definitely a conscious decision of I need to stop yelling and start shooting. That we are past the point of that I'm going to gain compliance by yelling at him. And then in the immediate moments after the shooting, thinking that I had been shot was okay. I need to almost immediately switch into making sure that he is no longer a threat to me, my partner, or anybody else in the community. And then I'm really worried about me. Then I'm really worried that I've taken her on my knee. When I got my pants up past my knee and I took a look, and it was just an abrasion. It was a big dump of adrenaline, knowing that I hadn't taken a bullet in the knee. And then knowing that my partner was okay, and that he hadn't taken any rounds. And then it was definitely a roller coaster. I went to the station initially, and then I went to BGH, our local hospital. And I think my blood pressure was about 250 over 175. Maybe not that high, but close. Yeah, felt like that.
Understandable.
I had a nice nurse that I'd worked with for since I'd been a policeman, who very politely but firmly told me that she was going to check me from toes to ears to make sure that I didn't have any holes that God didn't intend. And I appreciated her slight humor in those circumstances, but she did. She did check, and I didn't. And
we're all grateful, Brad. We're all grateful. Not just the citizens of the city that you serve, but all of us law-abiding, trying to do right citizens out there that need you to protect us. And we are so grateful for that. I can speculate based on my own calls, the most serious calls that I've been involved in, nothing like this. That the worst part of it all is the aftermath, the coming down from it, the realization of what actually just transpired. Once the training is done, you're in training mode is over, and the event is what it is. You also then had to deal with the S.I.U, an independent board in the province of Ontario, correct? That will investigate all police occurrences that result in injury and or death. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah, serious injury or death, and then their mandate has expanded a little bit in the last year. So there was a new S.I.U Act, and so now they investigate all firearms discharges by police that are not in training or to destroy an animal or things like that. Wow. And so they're involved in a little bit more stuff now than they used to be. Yeah, so the S.I.U comes down. They assign investigators and forensic investigators, and they conduct an investigation. And the police service also conducts an investigation to make sure that all our policies and procedures and everything were conducted properly.
And I know during those investigations, during that time frame, which from what I've seen, there was about a 1 month window from when the incident occurred till the S.I.U came up with their decision to their conclusion. And during that investigation, this would probably be one of the hardest things for me personally is you're not allowed to speak. You're not allowed to tell your side. You're not allowed to have witnesses involved. The S.I.U. basically shuts down everybody from talking about anything, including telling your side of the story other than to their investigators, correct?
Yeah, and
And
I didn't speak to the SIU on council's advice. I didn't provide them at that time. And I won't get into the reasons for or against. But then it took about, you're right, it was about a month. In the years after that, it was much longer. The SIU could sometimes take up to a year, and under their new piece of legislation, unless there's some very extraordinary circumstances, it's down to they've got to issue a decision within 120 days. So, which is better than sometimes the year. And so,
but such a long time pending,
difficult.
regardless of how correct you knew you functioned, you're always going to be second guessing yourself during that moment of now outsiders critiquing you during the probably worst day of your job, worst day of your career,
Yeah.
and everyone looking at your actions under a microscope. And that whole time, you not being able to just come out and tell everyone, look, this is what happened. This is why I did what I did.
Yeah.
I'm not a bad person. I'm doing my job. And here it is. And that stress, how did you cope, Brad? What did you do in that month?
Yeah, I don't know. I grew up, Hopper, I don't think with many mechanisms to deal with those stress. I didn't have a lot of events leading up to that in my life that gave me those tools to deal with that. I didn't have a lot of that stress. And so I was confronted with having to get skills because I didn't have those skills. So for about 6 months, and I'm told that that's fairly normal for type A first responder, street cop kind of people, that you can go for about 6 months, that your defense mechanisms and your personality and your jerkiness probably gets you through for the first 6 months. And that was almost exactly what it was like for me. And Christmas 2004, I was in a pair of board shorts and flip flops handing out Christmas presents from a mountain equipment co-op duffel bag. And I kind of figured out that maybe the wheels on my cart were a little loose and could need a little bit of help. And so I sought out a guy who worked at the crisis unit at Belleville Hospital at the time. And Franco's a very, very, very caring individual who also has an amazing backstory about trauma in his life, and about his brother-in-law being on the other end of my spectrum. His brother-in-law was shot and killed on the line of duty in Sudbury. So Franco has a special place and a special affinity for police officers. And Franco gave me tools. He gave me skills and abilities to recognize that sometimes first responders are put in positions that other people aren't. And he was able to guide me through some of those difficult, for me, one of the biggest ones was play, stop, rewind, 10,000 times a day, play, stop, rewind. And it wasn't an evaluation that I had made big mistakes. It wasn't an evaluation of, could I have done this differently if I'd gone here or done this or done that sooner or done that later. None of that it wasn't a question of those things. It was just a debilitating play, stop, rewind, play, stop, rewind, play, stop, rewind, play, stop, rewind. And then some of the stress manifests itself in really, really weird ways. Like I would work an 11-hour day shift at work and cool as a cucumber, nothing, it's all good. Investigate stuff, lay charges, deal with the public. Everything is good, and no blips in my radar at all. And then I'd get some McNuggets on the way home, and I wanted barbecue sauce, and the 16-year-old at McDonald's put in sweet and sour, and it would take me an hour and a half to get my shit under control because I got sweet and sour and not barbecue sauce. And it's
Inappropriateness, right? You just suddenly have inappropriate reactions to
it. Just didn't land in the right places.
Yeah.
And that wasn't me. And that wasn't me before. And those struggles stay with me to this day to try to make sure that that I recognize that we're put in different positions than other people. And I find that that June day, 17 and a bit years ago, is a long ways in my past. My life has really moved on since then. Um, and I think often of his sons, of Curtis's sons, and of that afternoon. Not long after the shooting, I had an opportunity to speak at the Rotary Club in Belleville about this event, and then our deputy chief Paul Vandergraff had invited me to come and speak at Rotary, um, and I talked a lot about of sons and fathers, and because that was that day in June was the day before Father's. It was the Friday before Father's Day, and I remember being at my mom and dad's that Sunday, and the event being so fresh and so new, and but spending a good amount of that day thinking about his sons, and I still do,
But
because they
that's
were.
because you're human, Brad, and you're a solid, emotional, caring individual that's doing your job to protect the community, because
Yeah,
that's who you are. And I can understand. I can't say I can relate, because there's nothing that will relate unless you've been in those shoes. But I can appreciate what you've gone through, and I want to come back to some coping mechanisms here shortly.
yeah,
But I want to say at this point that the S.I.U. fully cleared you, rightfully so, and the other officer that was involved. This individual that you were familiar with that led to a lethal injury after your encounter was actually talking about the dreaded suicide by cop, and he was going out in a blaze of glory. And this was his intent all along. And it was almost like you stood no chance, Brad, of any other outcome. Anything else would have been even worse. That's all I can say, because both the officers involved physically were okay. They had to deal with a lot of other things. But
yep,
I just want to say that the gun was not registered to him, correct? I'm reading this stuff on the post reviews. The
yeah,
S.I.U., as you say, 8 bullets struck the suspect of the 16 shot by you and the other officer. Um, and they ultimately found um, the suspect's own mother. I found this very touching. Came forward with almost an understanding and a kudos to you, knowing that you were put in a position that was so horrific that it led to the results that it did. And the family to come on your side and not instantly rage against police in general has to feel somewhat reassuring to you. I'm not saying that you feel better, but to
yeah,
know that all the pieces are starting to add up, that on that day the investigating bodies, the families of the victim, yourself, you did the steps that were required of you in your line of duty. And we all, again, Brad, thank you so much for that. We need that. The management of the police service, were your management at the time were very complimenting, very supportive. Once the results came out, there was no issue of any sort of discipline, nor should there have been, from what I read. And what's scary to me is I've read since the occurrence in '04 that a lot of people knew this individual had this intent for a long time, and he was actually armed for quite a while, and no one came forward,
yeah,
and no one reported to, say, Crime Stoppers or to the individual police department or whatever. And that is truly scary. And again, it led to you having to have this horrible, horrible day at work that you're still talking about, and we're gracious. We're very grateful you are talking about it. We're all curious, even us responders who have been here all those years alongside you. We still don't know these details that you're telling us today,
yeah,
and it's very brave of you. I myself, in my line of work, I've started to seek regular mental cleansing, if you will, mental therapy. I started to see an individual after talking with Sarah Roche. We had an
yeah,
interview with her, and her recommendation, what she had been through, is we all need to just kind of offload some of that mental turmoil before it
yep.
overflows. And are you doing anything ongoing, or how do you?
So no, I don't have anything ongoing right now, and I think it's a combination of things. I've left that folder wide open, and um, the for me, some of the tools that I got are still useful. They're still sharp and
Good,
they still work.
good,
And I think some people need that. They need that full time, and they put that as they put that support person or support team. Um, uh, they adopt them. They become part of their life, and they rely upon those people to assist them in filing. And I call it filing because that's exactly what how I look at these things. Trauma is a little bit like pregnancy. It is or it isn't. It's on or it's off. And for me, with trauma, it's either you own the event or the event owns you. There's only two. There's only two ways that happens. The guy who carries around the 55-gallon pail on his back with all of the events gets tired pretty quickly, and that's a factor. I think that many first responders who suffer from PTSD are gonna. That's one of the first symptoms that presents itself is they're exhausted, and they're exhausted from carrying around the weight of the dead kids. They're exhausted from carrying around the weight of the gunshot suicides.
right.
They're and for me. I think I'm blessed that I don't have a tremendous memory of these things. I just don't
License
have.
plates, baby, Brad.
Yeah,
License
license plates.
plates.
Yeah, license plates and
Yeah,
suspended drivers.
that's
I'm
right.
good.
Yeah,
But the other thing is that I package those things up. I put those events in a little mason jar and I store them away. And I can visit them anytime that I want to visit them. They belong to me. And if I want to go back and go over those events or share them with coworkers to talk about the work porn or lessons to be learned, they're there and they're available to me. And for me, that's hugely valuable because that wall is huge, and there's lots of room on there for me to put those jars and to put those events, and
good.
I don't have to carry them with me.
And
And some
the point
things,
of this pod, this
yeah,
point is there is no answer. There is no solution that's textbook for anyone.
yeah.
We all have our own mechanisms, and we need to hear how each individual, such as yourself, or how I deal with things, or other guests we've had. And it's very important that you say that your way is working for you, and you're recognizing that you can go back to it if you need it.
I was first on scene, Hopper, in July of 2010 for a little boy that was run over in a parking lot, and his name was Walker, and he was 2 years and 8 months old. And I did CPR on little Walker for about 10 minutes, and Walker didn't survive his tremendous head injury. And I remember sitting on the idling bumper of the old ladder 726, I think, and I was cleaning the blood from Walker from the cuticles of my fingernails, and my twin, and I had to have a real, do I own this or does this own me? And I had to recognize that little boy had an unsurvivable injury. No, are we?
Yeah, we're good. I
Having,
think your signal's just cutting a bit, but I got you. I got
okay.
you. No, you're good. It's just waving a bit.
And so Walker stays with me. Walker's jar is a little bit bigger than some other ones because you recognize that one comes home a little bit more. There's a because he's so close in age to two of my sons. But you move on too. You recognize that you have a job to do, and I did good CPR on that little boy, and I recognize afterwards from what I learned from the coroner and from others that there was nothing that any of us could have done. That injury could have happened at the front doors of Sunnybrook, and he wouldn't have survived.
He was fortunate to have you there at all. I mean, that's what it comes down to, and sometimes there's just nothing you can
Yep.
do. And you have had multiple accidents you've been to over the years, medicals, fires. You definitely have a shelf full of jars, if you will. And somehow, Brad, this is the Brad we know.
Hmm?
This is you. We still see you out there every day. You're proud. This one by the radar traffic vehicle that you had there, identifying the plate readers, or how,
Yep.
I don't know the lingo that you had, but always proud and always serving and always noble. And very rarely do we see the baggage that's behind there. And that's just because you've developed these mechanisms that are very, very noble. And we thank you for that. I mean, here's you doing your thing, right? Working with the
Yeah.
public. Not everything that you do is going to be as intense or as high end as what we've talked about, as emotionally draining, but it's all just as important for building those foundations. And this is how I picture you.
I'll
You're
have
always in
to.
the community, you
Yeah,
know.
there's
Oh, we lost you there. That picture there. Oh, give me a sec, Brad. You'll come back in here, I think. Or I hope we haven't lost you. I'm gonna click you out and click you back in. We've lost Brad on his signal. I'm gonna get Brad to leave if you can hear. Oh, we might get you there. I'm gonna get you maybe to leave the link, Brad, and come back in if you can hear me. Oh, hang on. There we go. I think you're back. How are we doing? There you are. So I'm showing some signal issues at your end a little bit, but it's
at
fine.
my end. Okay.
Yeah, it's just it's technology. It's what we do. We're of the same age group, and we have the same technical competencies, I'm sure. And sometimes you just got to let it roll.
Let
Now
me
you,
let
yeah,
me just let's just pause just for a sec,
yeah,
and I'll move and see if I can get a better spot. Maybe I'm in a
yeah.
bad
I'm gonna
spot.
click you out when you're ready. I'm gonna bring you back in.
Okay.
What a story. Brad, I've worked with this man for many years, and we've shared many calls together. Ironically enough, Brad and I have helped each other's families in our line of work, living in the town that we do. Um, I've responded to his side of things, and he's actually helped out with mine. And part of it's small town, part of it is just the fact that we are emergency workers in the same area. It doesn't matter if you're in a big town, small town. Sometimes it's inevitable that you're going to be meeting up. Brad's story is not unique to policing, and unfortunately, there are many that have his story. But we are very lucky that he was willing to come on today to share his story. And Brad is someone who I'm proud to work alongside, and we often joke we have some dark humor, as most of us responders do, but we definitely have a mutual respect for each other. And there he is back. Welcome back. Just talking about us sharing calls and how we've kind of helped each other's own families over the years.
Oh, 100. Yeah,
And
100%.
it's just part of what we do in the emergency world. And I have your back, you have mine, and there's a lot of respect for each other on that level. Some of our calls have been pretty gruesome, and some are unique. And I don't think people even think of such things as, for example, Brad, I remember working at the fire hall one day, and I got a call to go meet you at a wrecking yard
Yeah.
to bring the jaws of life for an accident that was long done. It was a fatal accident. And we were actually called to help you look for a wallet.
Yeah.
It's stuff that people don't realize, that there's still some trauma involved in that. As we're in the wrecking yard, we're trying the compound. You have us down there with the jaws tearing the car apart methodically under your observation as the investigating officer, or whatever the title may be. But we know that we're looking for a wallet for someone that's just died in that vehicle not too long ago. And again, more trauma, but again, working alongside with each other, uh, we make the best of it. And I think we've
Yeah.
had a very fortunate career in this area with in general, like any job, but we have a very good bunch in general that we work with.
Well, I early on when I started, I recognized that um, I'd known all along from playing team sports and having a good close group of friends that I've had since I was a little boy, that there's value in relationships, and I recognized that I was going to need friends in the fire department. I was going to need friends that were paramedics. I was going to need people, and not just on a hey, how you doing today kind of level. And so I endeavored for the first about 12 years of my career, every Sunday that I worked, I came and had coffee at the fire hall.
You do, yeah, and
And
you're a legend, Brad. Everyone
well,
knows you as Brad, and that you support us. We kick each other's tires a bit, but
and that's okay. And that's okay. But those are the ones that those are the you learn those people, and you learn what their wives' names are and the teams that their kids play on, and then when it's 2:00 in the morning and you've screamed up to a structure fire, and young Ben's standing on the front porch holding a 2.5 by himself, trying to knock the fire down. And he goes through the deck, and you're dragging that large diameter hose over because Captain Keys is by himself, and he's sending 2 guys through a second floor window on vent enter search, and that this is the real deal. It doesn't get more dynamic. It doesn't get more serious than that, and you don't know when that day comes.
that's right.
And
Sometimes there's never enough hands, and knowing who's got your back isn't always just the person in the exact same uniform.
no,
And in fact, Brad, you've found more fire than I have as a fireman. You've actually come across fires that
yeah,
were and initiated the calls and done kind of a rapid search and entry without any kind of attire on at all. And then and you've also helped my family personally, and it's stuff that won't be forgotten when there's a call for help or a need for an intervention or a lesson, or in my case with you and some of your family details, not necessary, some medical attention that I could give, and a little
yep.
extra kind of pat on the back for you, knowing what you were going through. And kudos to you. And I'm so grateful that you are one of my colleagues, a brother of the emergency services here. And you are truly, if we had such a thing, Brad, you would have the honorary firefighter title wrapped.
I'm a black cloud.
Yeah, I know. Whenever you're around, we're
There's,
going. But sometimes we wonder if just because you like to see us work every once in a while, because you guys
yeah.
have been working so much harder all the time. Now let's go to this. Let's. This is one of your latest projects. You're still involved?
Yeah, still
Yeah,
involved. Yeah, so
because
that's
we used this recently. You and I were on an ice water rescue.
yeah,
So recently, I guess it was almost a full season ago now.
yep,
But we had calls for a possible person through the ice on our waterfront here, and we were gearing up with our fire stuff and all of our water rescue. And all of a sudden, we hear this large mosquito in the background, and suddenly Brad's sitting there with his drone, and Belleville Police have now entered a drone to the service,
yep.
and given you another role, right?
And it initially introduced wearing my hat of collision investigator. So a tool that gives me something that I can take a picture, and then I can scale that. I can scale that picture, and that can assist me in having just another dimension of capturing. We call it collision reconstruction, and in many ways, it's just looking at those events from many different ways, and hoping that you're able to, at the end of the day, bring a fulsome picture of what's taken place to all the involved parties, and sometimes to the court as well. And so the drone gave us that tool, but what the drone opened up is that there's a whole world available to us in search and rescue, and also in officer safety, and in being able to
Even in our world, Brad,
in
where
your
like
world.
post fire,
Yep.
you go to a scene and you need to have a look in where you physically can't get to, and
Yep.
knowing we have your skills on that too, we're also very appreciative of what you're bringing. Now, you and I are similar. I've had various ranks in my careers, and I end up boots to the ground.
Yeah.
The jobs I'm doing, I'm back on the road, hands on. That's just kind of the type of person I am. And you have excelled tremendously. And again, you've kind of come back to the road. Right?
No, to the road, and I wish I was on the road more. And I've said it many times, Brad, that I wear the street cop badge with a lot of honor. And I think that there are some people who get into policing for very noble reasons, and they want to do things that don't involve, police cars and wearing a uniform and being at work at 2:00 in the morning. And that's okay, because some of the jobs that they want to do, I want nothing to do with.
Agreed.
And that's just not me. And for me, policing is all about being out in the community. And the, it's hard because some people talk about I want to help people, and there's a lot of ways that you can help people. The day in and day out, like our PSWs and people like that. Like they help people on a minute by minute basis. Absolutely. And so that they are helpers. Those the people that do those difficult jobs. Policing for me is much more about being that person that stands between good and evil. That person who is when you call 911 in the middle of the night because something has happened, that I'll be the person that is going to get there. Historically in my career, I'm the first one to get there, and that I'm going to affect change in your situation. Sometimes that change isn't going to bring your loved one back. Sometimes that change doesn't change the tragic occurrence that you're in. We talk about ideas and kind of mantras and things that get us through. And years ago, I heard there was a Toronto Fire was graduating a class of recruits, and there was a dad who was also a serving. I think he was like a deputy chief with Toronto Fire, and they said, "What would you tell your son as he was starting down this road? What kind of advice did you give him?" And the guy said, "I told him just to remember that you didn't cause any of this." And that for me has been a big driving component, is that you remember that in your world the tones go off, in our world the radio rings, and we go and we do the best we can in sometimes very, very difficult circumstances. And
I live by that, Brad.
What's that?
I've had to live by that, where certain things I can't change. It doesn't matter. I didn't cause it. I can't fix it. I will try.
Yep.
And you have to acknowledge that. And I think that's part of our coping, right? That's part of how we can process some of this stuff that we're seeing as part of our job.
I wish that the fire service was able to somehow impart some of the wisdom onto policing, because there's one emotion which really needs to change in policing, and that's anger. And cops are allowed to be angry. I mean, where you look at the TJ Hookers and the Andy Sipowicz of the world, and it was embraced, right? It was that's an emotion that we tolerate, right? We somehow that's what our hero cops are supposed to be, is a little bit angry, and that belays sometimes the fact that they're really struggling with the events that they've lived through. At the fire hall, at least from what I've seen. That's not really tolerated. It's if you're after that bad call, after that neonatal VSA call, you guys go back and you sit as a group, as 5 or 6 or 8, and there's an informal debriefing over pancakes or whatever.
Chili, Brad. Chili, usually.
Chili. Sorry, chili. Yeah. And but there's an automatic acceptance that we've just had a really abnormal event, and you get to experience that as a group. And in policing, a lot of the time that doesn't happen, right? Because you get back in your car and you drive around all by yourself, and you brood and you stew, and that sometimes leads to trouble. We're
fortunate too, Brad, that even in the paramedic side of things, where we're under the sheer volume that you're under in policing. But people often want to see paramedics. They often want to see the fire department. It's just the nature of the job. So anger, I think, is also part of your just constant dealing with things that none of us can deal with. And you're dealing with the problems that we won't deal with, and we just refuse to. If we run into a certain problem with certain individuals, we don't deal with it. We call you, let you deal with it. So, and anger is definitely a sign of trauma, stress, not coping, as you said. And I don't know how you do what you do. I'm going to say it. I've had the other 2 services. I'm certified in both, but there will not be the trifecta here, Brad. There will not be the attempt to get into policing. I couldn't do it. And kudos to you. I know I've had you come on here and tell your story, and I'm super grateful, as will everybody who's listening, to just wonder what it would be like to live a day like that at work.
But I wouldn't have it any other way, Hopper.
And that's why you're you're as recognized and as popular and as respected as you are in what you do, and we thank you for that. And I thank you for coming on. All of my guests, I'm going to kind of wind this down. We could go on forever, and I imagine you may come back on here at some point. Hopefully,
I'd be privileged to.
we could have a few agencies at the same time, even, which would be quite interesting. That's the next goal. To end it, to kind of wrap it up, I asked my guests the same three questions the first time they're on, and it's totally unrelated to anything that we talk about. It's kind of a nice follow up to our discussion. Now, this podcast, Offload Delay, is meant to be a fly on the wall in our world, kind of our offload delay in the emerge department and how all the services mingle, as well as we talk about delaying our mental baggage and how we deal with that. And we've kind of touched on that. But for you, if you could be a fly on the wall in any setting, anywhere other than the fire hall, Brad, what honestly, if you could be any, it doesn't matter who, famous, infamous, where would you want to have an inside view?
I don't know. I think 24 hours sitting on sitting on the wall in the Oval Office would be pretty cool.
Yeah. Especially depending on which term you were.
Yes. Yeah. Who comes and who goes. I think that would be. I think that would be. And I think that there's lots of times that you think people, and because of your personality and your mechanisms, you think you have an understanding about things. And a lot of the times I've been really challenged about, I've made a comment or I've said something about a person, and then I've learned afterwards that I was not 180, but I was 179.8 degrees wrong about that person. Yeah. And so I think, if I could sit somewhere, I think I'd probably sit on one of my friends' walls at some point.
Yeah. Just to see the world through a neighbor's eyes,
through one of my friend's eyes. And I think that it would greatly benefit me because you learn so much and you have these ideas about things. And a lot of the time, the way that you frame things or your anger about people or your misgivings or whatever it might be are often really misplaced, because it's that adage of you've never walked a mile in their boots.
That's right.
And so I think that
I have to agree. I agree. I've done the same thing.
A chance to be able to see things through one of your loved ones, one of your good pals, or one of them, to see things for 24 hours through their boots would be.
And in that way, you're seeing yourself, right? You're going to see yourself from that third.
Because I'm right all the time.
Well, yes, we've learned that at the fire hall, so we don't challenge it at all. Second question, easy one. Well, it's a simple question anyway. You can only have one food only for the rest of your life. What do you have?
Oh, see, now this is easy for me because
what is it?
Dinosaur Barbecue in Syracuse, New York.
Oh, you've been too? Yeah.
I know. Yes, I have the T-shirts, and I'd go every night.
And now you don't need a COVID test.
No, now I can
within 78 hours. 72
now I can actually go. Yeah, I was introduced with. We went to Cooperstown. Some pals and I went on a road trip one weekend, and we went to the Baseball Hall of Fame. And on our way home, we spent a night in Syracuse, and we saw a Syracuse football game, and then we had a couple of pops at the Dinosaur Barbecue.
So brisket, ribs, doesn't matter.
The platter, the pick three,
just everything, smoke and barbecue sauce everywhere.
Good. And 150 people bumping into you.
That's how you know it's good.
That's how you know it's good.
Okay, last question. This will be interesting as a first responder. I need to know the smelliest place you have ever been. Is it work related? Personal related?
Yeah, work related.
The same smell that I'm used to.
So work related. It was the second week in January, and I was called to a break and enter. I won't tell you where it was, but it was up a rickety flight of stairs, and I remember it was mid 2000s. And there was a girl there, and she was reporting that somebody had kicked in a little panel, and they'd gained entry and stolen a bunch of their Christmas presents. And there was an odor, but it was I couldn't place it. But it wasn't a nice odor, but I just couldn't place it. it was cold and outside, and it was about 85 degrees inside this little unit. And it was one of those big rear projection televisions, like one of those ones that you need 7 pals. And I didn't know how they would have carried it up these rickety stairs. And there's a stain on the floor in front of the on the rug in front of the TV, and then there's a little basket on the floor, and there's a little dog, a Chihuahua, a very small little dog, and it's 5 or 6 little pink things hanging off its belly. And the girl said that the puppy had babies on New Year's Day. And then I put 2 and 2 together and realized that what was on the floor in front of the television was, and then it was and that break and enter I think is still open because I just left. I didn't want to.
They
Didn't want to
didn't
vomit
bother.
in the.
They didn't bother to clean up. They couldn't be bothered. The big screen TV was more important, and you and I know it always leads. It's almost always a result of sheer laziness or ignorance that the worst of these types of calls come from.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes mental health, all the above.
Yeah.
But okay, so that's a new one. Puppy related smells.
Puppy related.
We'll leave it. But yeah, I
terrible
can.
Stuff.
And unless you've lived these things, right? The description doesn't even matter if we tried it. It's not even needed. It's just you need to actually experience some of the natures of the smells of the jobs and the calls we get involved in. But Brad, it's been a pleasure.
No, it's always
really good.
Every time I get to spend time with you, pal, it's a joy. And sometimes it's on the side of a snowy highway, and sometimes it's over a cup of coffee. And today was this way. But
fire hall's always open. Always. You know that. You're one of us. And
well, and you know what? Before you go, so this past year, it was the second little baby that I'd done CPR on in 5 days. And but I was the duty officer that day. It happened close to the police station, and I'd run out to try to help with the AED in my arms, and I couldn't go to the fire hall. They invited me to come and have coffee, and I said I can't because I'm in charge of the station today. And they brought coffee to me. They came. They went and got coffee and brought coffee to me, and we had coffee at the police station.
That's kind of the way it works.
So
right? That's how we get by.
Those are the things that you don't. When I heard the air brakes pop and the guys piling out with a take 12, and came in and they brought the coffee to me. And
it's not about the coffee, Brad.
You know. No, I know, but
it's an excuse for guys and even females and just colleagues to get together and make sure you're all right.
So and, those things go a long way.
You've had one heck of a career so far.
Long ways to go too.
Yeah, and on behalf of everyone, thanks for sharing your story.
Oh, well, thank you, Hopper.
And being willing to protect the community for all these years that we have. And I look forward to catching up over coffee.
Yes.
Not fires you're finding for us.
Yeah. Okay. I'll try not to.
I look forward to having you back, and we'll chat soon.
Yeah, love to.
All right, mister. Yeah. Well, there you go. Who knew? There's no words for trying to thank someone for coming on to share their story of a job which ultimately ended them, ending someone else's life to protect all of us. So, Brad, thank you so much for what you do. It's great to work alongside you. It's a pleasure. Hopefully everyone out there listening to this can just have that extra bit of respect for each other out there. Like Brad said, you don't know another person until you walked a mile in their shoes, and it's hard to judge. And before you can do that, we need to take care of ourselves. Hopefully you have some mechanisms in place. If not, you can seek out. Hopefully you can seek out something that will help you. I need to thank some people before we go. I've got your back 911. They've jumped on board with us now. They are tremendous supporters of first responder mental health, suicide prevention, suicide awareness. They do that through their foundations, through their merchandise, through their swag. Very popular, very trendy, very stylish group that gives right back to us responders for our own mental well-being. Available for the public to buy as well as us responders. Also need to thank Dean Blundell and his network, deanblundell.com, for supporting me, bringing this network, this podcast to the network, and letting us do what we do. You can see this podcast on deanblundell.com or YouTube on the Offload Delay channel, and you can also listen to the audio version on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And my social media tags, Offload Delay on Instagram, Twitter, again, the Offload Delay channel on YouTube, and to a lesser extent, Facebook. Not much used anymore, but it's still there if you have to reach out. And you can also reach out to me. I have my own email here. It's offload.delay14@gmail.com. If there's something you want to talk about, something you want to mention, shout out, maybe a show idea, whatever it may be, don't hesitate to reach out. For now, that's it. That's another pod. That was a tremendous podcast. Again, thank you, Brad, for your story and for everything you do. And stay safe out there. We'll be seeing you soon.